Well, hello, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Ryan Evans. I'm with the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and we do these webinars most Thursdays at this time at noon Central. You can always find an updated schedule on our center's website at cap.unl.edu, and we'll post this recording there. There's an archive section on that webpage, the cap.unl.edu webinar page. If you find that, this will be up there in the next 24 hours or so if you want to review anything or share it with someone who could not make it. And we're glad to have you here. If you have any questions as we go today, we definitely invite you to type those into the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll work to answer those at the end of the presentation. And today is a special webinar from the Center for Ag Profitability, as we've been doing this, I think, pretty much every recent election season now, as we review ballot issues that are facing Nebraska voters in the election coming up in a few weeks. And there are several this year on the November ballot, including 2 abortion initiatives, 2 medical marijuana initiatives, an issue regarding state funding for private school scholarships, and also a paid sick leave initiative. So to discuss these, we are glad to be joined again by Professor Dave Aiken, who is in the Department of Agricultural Economics here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Professor Aiken is an extension water law and agricultural law specialist, and I will turn it over to him now to tell us about these ballot issues. Dave?
Great. Thanks very much, Ryan. Yeah, Ryan gave you a good rundown in terms of what we're going to do. And, today I'm just going to try to help you understand what each of these ballot measures would do. It's up to you to decide whether they're a good idea or a bad idea. That's not my job. But some of them are kind of confusing. They're all kind of confusing for me at the outset. So we'll get going and try to see if we can have a little better understanding of what these all are about and what your for or against vote will mean. And Ryan mentioned that this presentation will be on the website, the cap.unl.edu website. With that, on the page for this webinar, will be a little booklet put together by the Nebraska Secretary of State pursuant to state law, which has quite a bit of information about all of the ballot issues. It has the ballot language. It has the full text of all of the initiatives. It has arguments that are made by people who support and oppose all of these ballot measures, and it goes into a lot more detail than we're able to do today. But hopefully, at the end of the webinar, you'll have a little better idea what some of these ballot issues are all about. Okay, I'm going to do these in order rather than grouping them logically, because I want to do it in the same order that they appear on the ballot, so that there's not any confusion about that. And so the first one is the Initiative 434, which is the pro-life abortion constitutional amendment. And 434 would basically prohibit abortions after 12 weeks of pregnancy or in the second or third trimester, with a couple of exceptions. The first one is a medical emergency, which is not defined, and then where the pregnancy was the result of sexual assault or incest. And this proposal is basically what already exists in Nebraska statutes, but if this proposal is approved and it gets more votes than the other abortion ballot initiative, then it would become part of the Nebraska Constitution. In contrast, Initiative 439, which is the very last one, I think, would allow abortions up to the stage of fetal viability. That is, usually within 23 or 24 weeks. And that is the pro-choice one. So the pro-life one is the 12-week, is sometimes referred to as a 12-week ban, and the pro-choice one would basically be a 24-week ban in very simple terms. Okay, next one is 435, and this is the Private Education Scholarship Partial Referendum. That's the title that it will have on your ballot. And there's quite a bit of background to this one. The Nebraska Constitution prohibits state funding for private schools, K through 12, in Nebraska, and that's been in our Constitution for quite a while. And just for background, one of the things that has distinguished the United States from other countries is that we got into the public education business, so to speak, before most other countries around the world. And historically, the United States has had, a very high literacy rate, and the idea being that in a democracy, where most people, or now virtually all adults, get to vote, it's good for the population to be educated so that they can read newspapers. This is, back a while when newspapers were a little more widespread than they are today. But that reading was important for people to be able to exercise the vote, the privilege of voting in a knowledgeable way. So public education is something that's been very important development in U.S. history, and so that's just a little background there. Okay. Last year, the legislature authorized a $25 million a year program to fund private school scholarships, and it's pretty complicated. I'm glad you don't have to understand that to vote on this bill. But it was opposed by teachers, opposed by public school supporters, circulated a petition to repeal it, and it got, they got their signatures quickly and verified by the Secretary of State's office. And so it was going to be on the ballot for, 2024, or the upcoming November ballot. And so supporters of this private school scholarship program repealed LB 753, so that the ballot, the repeal of 753 on the ballot was no longer relevant, and they replaced it with a smaller $10 million a year private school scholarship fund. And it's a 10-year program, so it's $100 million total, $10 million a year for 10 years. If you read about this, you'll see 10 million, you'll see 100 million and stuff, and so it's 10 million a year for 10 years, or 100 million total, and then it would expire if it were not extended by the legislature. Okay, so Initiative 435, which is on the ballot, would repeal the funding for the private school scholarship program. And just as a point of interest, the $10 million is less than 1% of Nebraska's state aid to school for the 2024-25 school year. So just to put the $10 million in perspective as a matter of interest. Okay, I won't do for and against for each ballot issue, but it was pretty easy to pull together for this. And these arguments come from the Secretary of State booklet or pamphlet that I referred to at the beginning of the webinar. So, arguments in favor of repeal and against the scholarship program, because if you vote in favor of the repeal, then the $10 million a year goes away. And so the scholarship program is basically, no program at all. Okay. Now, the first one I have in brackets, it's possibly unconstitutional. I didn't have time to research this to see how far the legislature could go in funding private school sorts of things. But it just, it's when you see that constitutional provision that I mentioned just a few minutes ago. This is scholarship program is certainly in direct support for the public schools, so possibly unconstitutional, but that's just as a matter of interest. Now, proponents for getting rid of the $10 million private scholarship program point out that public schools educate the vast majority of kids in Nebraska. Also, public schools are subject to a lot of scrutiny, because they're governed by locally elected school boards. School board meetings are public meetings open to the public. The public school budget process is also a series of public meetings. So there's a fair amount of transparency with regards to the operation of public schools. Private schools are not subject to any similar types of requirements. There's no publicly anything, no publicly elected oversight, no, meetings are not required to be public, that kind of thing. So that's a big difference between the operation. Another significant difference is that private schools can operate on the basis of selective admissions. They cannot, if you can't afford the tuition, then they don't have to take you. Going back to history, that's the way it was historically. When education was, going back centuries in time, when any education that was available, parents had to pay. If the parents couldn't pay, the kid couldn't go to school, and that's where Sunday school started. In Protestant churches, kids would learn how to read in Sunday school. So it really was school, in the sense that they would learn how to read so that in time they'd be able to read their Bible. Anyway, private schools can decide which student to take, and they don't have to take everybody, whereas public schools have to take everybody. They have to take everybody. And then many Nebraska counties do not have a private school within the county. Okay, and all those arguments, except for the unconstitutionality, all come from that Secretary of State publication. Okay, so here are the arguments against repeal of the funding. So they are arguments in favor of the private school scholarship program. And fundamentally, this gets down to school choice. The idea is that, and school choice is a national educational issue. It's certainly not unique to Nebraska, and has been controversial when it's been an issue, when it's been debated in other states, just like it's been a somewhat controversial in Nebraska. Lots of ads on TV and stuff. But the school choice is the idea is that parents should have more than one option in terms of where they send their kid to school. And so that there's the public school option, but then there are private schools. And the idea is that a lot of parents would like to send their kids to a private school for a variety of reasons, but they can't because they can't afford the tuition. And so the scholarship program says, well, what we're going to try to make a lot of these scholarships, need based. They don't all have to be need based, but that's a very important selection criterion. So that if the parents want to do it, but can't afford to do it, they might be able to get this the some or all of the tuition paid through this state program. Now I'm not positive about whether partial scholarships are available under this, but it would make sense if there would be, but I'm not. I can't. But that may not be how it works. And I've got the phrase educational freedom there in quotes. That's actually out of the statute, the current, $10 million a year private school scholarship program statute. It's in there as being one of the ends to justify the program. Okay. So people in favor of the private scholarship program also point out that repeal could hurt students who would benefit, from being in a different school where they would have a better chance to learn and succeed. And we've seen, and I've got bullying there in parentheses. Bullying actually is also specifically referenced in the statute, and the idea being that if kids having a tough time in public school, that they might do better in a private school. And bullying, of course, and bullying in schools has become a very high profile issue in the past several years. I think it's noteworthy that many of the school shootings many of the shooters have been kids that were bullied in school. So that's just connection there. But so that would be some of the argument in favor of keeping the program and voting against the repeal. Okay, paid sick leave. This is Initiative 436, and it's the official title is the Nebraska Healthy Families and Workplaces Act. Excuse me. Currently, it is up to the employer whether they provide paid sick leave to their employees or not. They are not required to do so under federal law. In general, there are 15 states that have some type of paid sick leave programs. Nebraska does not, but Initiative 436 would establish such a program effective October 2025. And under 436, employees would accumulate 1 hour of paid sick leave for each 30 hours that they work up to a firm limit in terms of how many days of paid sick leave they would get per year. And there's two categories. For small businesses, for less than 20 employees, they could accumulate up to 40 hours a year, which would be 5 days a year. And for larger employees, it, it would be 56 hours a year of paid sick leave or seven days, working days per year. Now, in either case, if the employer is not limited by this, they could, if they wanted to give their employees 2 weeks, up to 2 weeks vacation per year, they could do that. But this would establish the minimum that all employees would have to meet, unless they've already got something in place that's more generous than that. And sick leave is fairly broadly defined, and it would significantly include taking care of a family member that needs that kind of assistance. Again, if 436 is adopted by voters, then it would take effect in October of 2025. So almost a year out from the election, not quite. Would not apply to government employers, which probably have their own sick leave policies or requirements, but I'm not sure about that. And there's no, I looked through it, and I don't see anything there that would provide an agricultural exemption. In a lot of these employment situations, there is an ag exemption, but I could not find one here. Doesn't mean that it isn't there in some other part of the Nebraska employment statutes, but I couldn't find it. So I don't think there is one, but I sure wouldn't bet my life on it. Okay, our next one is a kind of complicated one, and with complicated history. And it's two initiatives, 437 and 438, and they both deal with medical cannabis. My first version of this slide said medical marijuana, but I went back and looked at the petition and looked at how it's going to appear on the ballot. It's medical cannabis. So that's these are the medical cannabis initiatives, and there's two of them. So some of you may remember that back in 2020 when we had the last presidential election, the what I'll call the medical marijuana petition was kept off the ballot because the Nebraska Supreme Court, in a controversial ruling, said that the initiative violated the two-subject rule. It says you can't have two different subjects in the same ballot initiative. There's a similar requirement that applies to the legislature. That when they pass a bill, it can only have one subject. It could, if it's got more than one subject, then it violates that constitutional requirement. So we didn't get to vote on medical marijuana in 2020 because of the two-subject rule. So the 2024 version took basically the 2021 and divided it into two different proposals based on the Supreme Court ruling back in 2020. And so that's why there's two initiatives. It's not that they're competing initiatives, they're companion initiatives. The proponents would prefer that they were all in one petition, but Supreme Court said no the last time around, so they have divided it into two. And the first one is the kind of the basic right to use medical cannabis. And then the second one sets up a regulatory program to oversee the use of medical cannabis if both the initiatives are adopted. Okay, so 437, this is the so-called Patient Protection Act, and it would make small amounts of medical cannabis products, and that's up to 5 ounces. The possession of those and the use of those would be legal if the user of the medical cannabis had written recommendations, and this would be like a prescription, but not really a prescription, but similar to a prescription, but written recommendations from healthcare professionals to use the medical cannabis product. And 437 also authorizes those healthcare professionals, and we'll get to who they are in just a little bit, but authorizes those healthcare professionals to assist patients with medical cannabis acquisition and use. So, it's saying it's okay for the medical professions to do it, and it's okay for the patients to do it if they've been authorized by their healthcare professional to use the medical cannabis. 438 is the second part of this package, the medical cannabis package, and it would provide oversight in the form of the Nebraska Medical Cannabis Commission to regulate production and distribution of these medical cannabis products. And it would also make the overall process of, producing medical cannabis, preparing these different products, medical cannabis products, and then selling them or dispensing them, through these, wherever these would be sold. And that all would be subject to the oversight by this Medical Cannabis Commission. Okay, so who are the healthcare professionals? Well, physicians, that makes sense. Licensed osteopaths. I'm not familiar with osteopaths. From what I've found very quickly online, that they have training that is similar to what medical doctors receive. They're not exactly the same. They are not chiropractors, although some of what they do looks like, to me, like what chiropractors would do. But anyway, they're similar to doctors, but not doctors. They're similar to osteopaths, but they're not chiropractors. And chiropractors are not considered healthcare professionals under this medical cannabis ballot initiative. So, but the osteopaths are. So if your medical provider is an osteopath, then, you would be covered if you needed to be. Okay. In addition to the physicians and the osteopaths, we have physician assistants who can write prescriptions under current laws in Nebraska, and then licensed nurse practitioners who also can write prescriptions under current law, and they would be allowed to write these medical cannabis authorizations, I guess you might call them, that would enable the person who wanted to use the medical cannabis products to go to wherever they are, where they're sold, and get their medical authorization filled, so to speak. Okay. Now, so that's the healthcare professional. That's who they are and who they aren't. But it's pretty broad. I mean, the physician assistants and nurse practitioners, really broadens it out. In addition, we've got the Medical Cannabis Commission, and it would include all three members of the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission. They would be, if you're on the Liquor Control Commission, you'd also be on the cannabis, and you might think of it as the Cannabis Control Commission. If both these are passed. In addition, the governor could nominate 0, 1, or 2 additional members to the Cannabis Commission, and those that are nominated by the governor then would need to be confirmed by the unicameral. So that's the Cannabis Commission, and it's the choice of the Liquor Control Commission as forming the nucleus of the Cannabis Commission is very interesting because presumably they've got expertise and regulatory authority in terms of bootleg liquor policing, that type of stuff. So that maybe that's why they set up the Cannabis Commission that way. Okay, and then the last point I think that's important is that for patients under 18 years old, you would need the written consent of parents or guardians. So that's a provision that is in there as well. Okay. And then finally, the definition of medical cannabis, and that includes marijuana, hashish, and concentrated cannabis, which is something I hadn't heard of before, but I'm sure it's the thing. And cannabis does not include hemp, so that's, I'm sure there are some issues in favor of that, but or some issues around that, but it's not something I've dug into. Okay, these two for and against did not come from the Secretary of State publication. Might be in there, but I mean, these are just two that kind of jumped out at me, both in terms of following the medical marijuana issue over the years, and then looking at what is in and what is not in the two medical cannabis companion initiatives. And one of the arguments that proponents of medical cannabis have made over the years is that it provides pain relief and other types of medical relief, say for, I believe, epileptics, stuff like this, that is safer or fewer side effects or less taxing than, say, the available prescription medications. And I just threw something out. I don't know the answer. I mean, safer than opioids? I mean, maybe they are. There's, I don't know, less likelihood of addiction. Who knows? But I know that there have been testimonials where people that have had severe pain from cancer and other types of things have said that that medical cannabis products have brought them a significant degree of relief. So that's certainly an important argument in favor of something like this. The against is that we have a pretty comprehensive system for the approval of prescription medicines. That has to go through the Federal Food and Drug Administration approval, go through safety trials, efficacy trials, all of that kind of stuff. The medical cannabis products would be completely outside of this prescription medicine approval and distribution system and control system, completely outside of that. And so you're looking at setting up something that will have at least some of the attributes of that FDA process, but it certainly looks like it'll be challenging and expensive to police non-medical use of medical cannabis products. I think that's a fair statement. And looking at it, from the legal perspective, that it's going to be tough. And some opponents would make the argument that, well, I mean, if these shops that sell the medical cannabis products, they have these medical cannabis products, they're going to want to sell as many as they can. And so some of them may be inclined to cheat or to make sales off the books, so to speak. that's, certainly, uh, certainly, it seems like that would be a possibility. But, you know, there are, I think there are some significant concerns about, legalizing these types of products with a relatively loose regulatory oversight system. That there may be some broader public health risks associated with that. So they're important things to balance. Like some clear benefits for some people, and that it would make their life better. But there are also some risks, some to the kind of the public at large. If you've been following any of these issues in the newspapers, you would know that there have been challenges to the how the petitions were circulated and approved before they were turned in to the Secretary of State's office, and allegations that some of the people who were notarizing, that the petitions had been circulated, met all the legal requirements, and that sort of thing. That there were some problems with some of the people who were notarizing these petitions, and so there's going to be a trial here in almost 2 weeks, not quite 2 weeks from now. And there's a potential that, that depending on how the trial plays out, could result in these two initiative petitions, one or both of them being, in essence, removed from the ballot. Well, the ballots are already printed, mailed out, all that kind of thing. So, it's certainly okay to go ahead and vote on these. When you go vote, if you want to vote on them, go ahead and vote on them. If it ends up that that they shouldn't have been put on the ballot, the fact that you voted for them or didn't vote for them isn't going to make any difference. So you can go ahead and vote for them if you want to, but there is this issue in terms of whether there were problems with the circulation petition circulation process. And I just want to point out, since we're in an era where there's all kinds of cheating going on in terms of vote counting and stuff like that, that the signatures were validated by local election officials in each county. And they were the ones who identified these potential issues, to the Secretary of State, who brought in the Nebraska Attorney General, and then they investigated and stuff like that. But the red flags, so to speak, about irregularities in the petition circulation process were made by these local election officials, who in Nebraska, almost like every other state, I'm just going to say that, do a great job. And it's hard to get stuff past them. And this, I think, is a great example of that. So while people who are supporting the medical cannabis ballot initiatives, are of course disappointed by what's happened in terms of these irregularities being identified at the broader level, we as citizens in Nebraska who want our democratic processes to work the way they're supposed to should be pleased that these possible irregularities were flagged at the local level in the petition signature verification process, which is very similar to what happens with ballots on election day. So they're doing their job. They're doing their job well, and hats off. Tip of the hat to them. And we should be proud that we have a clean and well-functioning election system in Nebraska, no matter what anybody tells you otherwise. Okay, I'll climb off the soapbox now. This is the second abortion ballot measure, and it's number 439, and it is a pro-choice option. And so we have two very different abortion proposals. The first one, 434, is takes basically what we have in Nebraska statutes regarding abortions, the 12-week ban, and puts that in the Constitution. 439 would put a very different abortion provision in the Constitution, and it's easier for me to think of this as the 24-week ban. So, you think of it as the 12-week ban and the 24-week ban. It's not absolutely precise, but it's gives you the general idea and an easy way to contrast the two. Okay, 439 would provide the right to abortion up to fetal viability, which in most cases is somewhere in the 23rd or the 24th week, around then. I'm not a physician, so that's can't get more specific than that, or at any time to protect the life or health of the pregnant woman. And so that would be, beyond, into the third trimester to protect the life or health of the pregnant woman. Nothing in there about rape, nothing in there about incest, so that's another difference between the two. But, 12 weeks versus 24 weeks is kind of the top line, big difference between the two proposals. 439 is the pro-choice option. 434 is the pro-life option. They are inconsistent with each other. And so if they both win, the one with the highest vote total is the one that gets into the Nebraska Constitution. If neither one of them win, then it doesn't, neither one of them, then nothing changes. And we have the 12-week ban in our Nebraska statutes. But if we, if one or both of them pass, and I expect them both to pass, I think, but we'll see, of course, then the one with the highest vote total is the one that would go into the Constitution. So we'll kind of see how that goes. Okay. Now, this is just a kind of a quick summary, and with the with this presentation and the materials from the Secretary of State's office and the slide set in the PDF form, I believe, that will be available on the webpage for this webinar. There will also be a one-page summary that summarizes, what a for and against vote will do on each of these ballot issues. So the first one, 434, the 12-week ban would go into the Constitution. So voting for it would do that. Voting against it would not put it in the Constitution, but it wouldn't change anything in the statutes. 435 takes the $10 million away from the private school scholarship program. So voting for 435 takes the money away. Voting against 435 leaves the money in the private school scholarship program. So that's the for and against, or the effects of voting on number 435. Paid sick leave, voting for 436 would require employers to provide paid sick leave, again, up to 5 days or 7 days a year, whether you're less than 20 or 20 or more employees. That would take effect in October 2025. Voting against it would not require employees to provide that paid sick leave to employees. 437 is the basic medical cannabis provision, that it would legalize it and legalize the use of it under, certain under authorizations from the medical providers, as we talked about before. So voting for 437 would authorize that. Voting against 437 would not authorize the basic use of medical cannabis for patients. 438 is the companion initiative. It sets up the regulatory oversight system, through the basically through the Liquor Control Board. So voting for that would establish the regulatory system. Voting against 438 would not establish the medical cannabis regulatory oversight system. Okay, and then the last one is the pro-choice abortion constitutional amendment. Voting for it would put the 24-week abortion ban into the Nebraska Constitution, and would basically override our current statutory 12-week abortion ban. So that it would basically establish something pretty close to Roe versus Wade, the constitutional provision that made most abortions legal in the United States, years ago, that was recently overruled by the U.S. Supreme Court. But so voting for 439 would basically establish something very, very close to what was available under Roe versus Wade. Voting against 439 would not do that, and would leave the existing abortion statutes alone, basically. And again, the two 434 and 439 are inconsistent with each other. So whichever one gets the highest votes in favor, assuming that they both pass. If one of them passes, then it's very easy which one goes to the Constitution. If they both pass, then they both the one that gets the most votes is the one that ends up essentially being adopted by the voters. They both can't go in. So, okay, the pamphlet should be available on the webpage for this webinar that Ryan mentioned earlier, along with the one-page summary of the ballot issues and the slide, and as well as this presentation and the PDF of the slides. So thank you very much. And with that, I think I will turn it back to Ryan, and it looks like we have some time for a few questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Dave. And thank you, everybody, for the questions so far. If you do have anything you'd like some clarification on, or anything you would like to ask Dave related to today's presentation, please type your question into the Q&A panel or the chat box in your Zoom window, and we'll get those to him here before we're out of here. So Dave, you were just talking about some of the different scenarios with 434 and 439, the two abortion issues and constitutional amendments there. And we had one viewer that did mention early on in the webinar when you were discussing 434, couldn't we just vote no for both abortion bills, and it's not an either or? Do we really need it in our Constitution, was the point this person raised. So I imagine, that's certainly possible that both of those couldn't pass, right? If people vote no in the
That's right.
majority of those.
Yes, they're all, I mean, they could both pass, they could both fail, and one or the other could pass. Yes, there is a general argument that is made against, excuse me, against initiative petitions in general, saying that that we shouldn't be littering our state constitution with um, policy issues that should be addressed in the legislature. And that is certainly a legitimate uh, argument about the role of the role of the Constitution versus the role of our legislative laws, which our state legislature gets together every year to repeal some, add new ones, and so on. Same with Congress in Washington. But our state constitution has very robust petition statutes, and not all states have these. In fact, there are quite a few states that don't have them. In fact, I can't remember now off the top of my head if half the states have them. But we are in the group, which is certainly a substantial minority, if not more than that, that does allow citizens to go in to write their own statutes, write their own constitutional provisions, repeal existing statutes, repeal existing constitutional provisions. That's all on the table through the initiative petition process, and so that's how we do it in Nebraska. Whether it's too easy to do that, whether it's too easy to get these ballot initiatives approved, that sort of thing, is certainly a legitimate policy issue to discuss. But at this point in time, all these initiative petitions are, at least with the possible exception of medical marijuana ones, they're all, they've all met the requirements. And the medical marijuana ones apparently where the Secretary of State's office felt they met the requirements when they said, yes, it can go on the ballot. But, that's the system that we have now. And if we think that it should be harder to amend the Constitution, then we would have to amend the Constitution to make it harder to amend the Constitution. Restraint, political restraint is in short supply, and it's so you'd have to change the basic rules of the game for that to happen.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question that came in regarding Initiative 436, the paid sick leave issue. Question was, are city or municipal employees included in the government exemption to the minimum sick leave benefits, which, the state of Nebraska employees or state of Nebraska is exempt the way that is written. And when I looked in the pamphlet, I'll put that pamphlet that Dave's been referring to in the chat. When I looked in there, I didn't see a mention of anything regarding city or municipal employees.
I think it includes all levels of government in Nebraska. I mean, it wouldn't apply to federal agencies, obviously, but state and local, which would include city and county and school districts. The whole would not be affected by that. Is my reading of it. I don't believe there are any carve outs. For anything. I think there's just a blanket exemption for government employees, whether they are state or local, including. So that would include municipal, school districts, so on.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I did link to that pamphlet in the chat if you would like to take a look at that. As Dave has mentioned too, it will also be included on the webpage where this recording and the slides will live. You can find that on our Center for Ag Profitability website. That's cap.unl.edu/webinars. We'll get that all up there in the next 24 hours or so. Last chance, I don't see any more questions. Some of them that came in, Dave, you answered during the course of the presentation. So thank you again to everybody for submitting questions and for attending today. You can always reach out to us if you would like anything else after this, if anything comes to mind. And we will be back next Thursday with another webinar. I think this one will be on pasture rangeland forage insurance. So I want to thank you for attending today again. And if you would just take a quick moment to complete a very short evaluation that should pop up when you close out of Zoom here, that really helps us out to let us know how this webinar was and any ideas you have for other webinars and what issues you're interested in. So thank you, Dave, and thank you everyone for attending today.
Thank you, Ryan.